I knew the company was in trouble the first time Malcolm Pierce used the word reinvention in a leadership meeting and looked directly over my head like I was furniture. Not old furniture, either. Expensive furniture. The kind people stop noticing until it gets removed and the whole room suddenly feels wrong. Before I tell you about his biggest mistake, please like this video and tell me where you're listening from. How old are you right now? I'll tell you exactly what happened. 17 years. That was how long I had given to Ellison Ridge Technologies. I joined before the glass lobby, before the investor plaques, before the downtown Seattle headquarters had a private elevator for executives who thought waiting beside regular employees was a hardship. Back then, we had one server room, 3 unpaid interns, and a founder named Graham Ellison who still answered customer complaints himself at 2 in the morning. Graham used to say, "Naomi, companies don't collapse because of big disasters. They collapse because someone forgot where the load-bearing walls are." So I learned every wall. I knew which vendors needed a phone call instead of an email. I knew which compliance reports had to be filed before noon on the second Tuesday of every quarter. I knew where the original board resolutions were stored, why the banking authority required 2 signatures, and which temporary process from 2011 had quietly become the reason payroll never failed. My title was Senior Operations Director, but titles were decorations. What I really was the person people called when the system jammed, when legal panicked, when finance lost a document, or when a new executive wanted to streamline something he did not understand. Then Graham got sick, and Malcolm arrived. He wore confidence like a rented tuxedo, shiny, stiff, and clearly not made for him. And from the moment he smiled at me, I knew he had already decided I belonged to the past. I want to make this clear, this story is fictional, but it is inspired by very real hidden corners of the workplace. Some details are supported by artificial intelligence to make the story more vivid, emotional, and to highlight the lessons behind it. Please listen with your whole heart. Malcolm Pierce did not take over Ellison Ridge Technologies like a leader stepping into responsibility. He arrived like a man entering a room he already believed belonged to him. Technically, he was Graham Ellison's nephew. Practically, he was the board's panic response wrapped in a tailored navy suit. Graham's illness had made everyone nervous. Investors wanted stability. The board wanted a familiar last name, and Malcolm wanted power with the least possible friction. On his first official morning, he walked through the office shaking hands, smiling too widely, and calling people essential while clearly sorting them into 2 categories: useful now and removable later. I watched him closely from the back of the conference room. He never asked how anything worked. He only asked who approved it, who controlled it, and whether it could be simplified. That was when the old guard started disappearing. First, it was Martin from Vendor Relations, a man who could calm a furious supplier faster than most executives could open a spreadsheet. Then Carol from Payroll was moved into a transitional advisory capacity, which meant she trained her replacement for 2 weeks before her badge stopped working. After that, Legal stopped inviting me to certain governance meetings. Finance began copying Malcolm's assistant instead of me. My calendar permissions changed without warning. People I had mentored for years suddenly avoided eye contact near the coffee machine. Malcolm called it modernization. I called it erasing the witnesses. He brought in friends from his consulting days, bright-toothed men with expensive watches and no institutional memory. One of them asked if our vendor contracts could be migrated into a vibe board. Another suggested replacing compliance review with an AI summary tool. Malcolm nodded like he had just heard the future knock. And through all of it, he smiled at me with that soft little cruelty reserved for people he thought were already gone. He did not understand that I had spent 17 years learning where the company kept its secrets. The meeting invite landed on my phone at 7:56 a.m., just as I was stepping out of the parking garage elevator with my coffee still too hot to drink. Subject line, quick alignment discussion. Location, people operations, conference room C. No agenda, no context, no courtesy. Just the kind of calendar ambush men like Malcolm used when they wanted control without witnesses. I knew before I opened the door Malcolm was already seated at the far end of the table, one ankle resting on his knee, scrolling through his phone like my career was a minor notification. Beside him sat Denise Holloway from HR, her hands folded too tightly over a folder she clearly wished belonged to someone else. "Naomi," Malcolm said, not warmly. "Thanks for coming in early." As if I had been invited to breakfast. I sat down, placed my coffee beside me, and waited. He gave me the speech he had probably practiced in the mirror. Ellison Ridge was entering a new chapter. Leadership had evaluated structural needs. The company required agility, innovation, forward-facing energy. My role, he said, had become less aligned with the future direction of the organization. Then he smiled. That was the part I remembered most clearly. Not the words. The smile. "We appreciate your historical contribution," he added, stretching historical like it was a polite way to say obsolete, but sometimes legacy can become limitation. Denise looked down. Malcolm leaned back, enjoying the performance. "Consider this a clean break, a chance for you to step away before the industry moves too far ahead." I blinked once. No argument, no begging, no trembling voice. I simply reached for my bag and stood. He seemed disappointed that I had not given him a scene. "At the door," he added. "Take it as a final lesson. Naomi, relevance has an expiration date." I turned just enough to look at him. Then I left without saying a word. If you think Malcolm Pierce was right to fire me before dawn and treat my legacy as a limitation, comment necessary. But if you believe what he did was cruel, arrogant, and gravely wrong, comment disrespectful. Personally, I'd like to know which side you're on. The elevator doors closed behind me, and only then did I let my hand tighten around the strap of my bag. I did not cry in the lobby. I did not turn back at the security desk. I did not give Malcolm Pierce the satisfaction of looking wounded where anyone could see. I walked through the revolving doors of Ellison Ridge Technologies with the same calm pace I had used every morning for 17 years. Outside, the city was still waking up. Delivery trucks coughed at the curb. Office workers hurried past with paper cups and tired eyes. To them, I was just another woman in a black coat leaving a building early. They had no idea I had just been handed the key to Malcolm's undoing. I got into my car, shut the door, and sat in silence for exactly 10 seconds. Then, I opened the glove compartment and removed a cream envelope with my name written across the front in Graham Ellison's careful handwriting. I had prepared it 2 weeks earlier, not because I wanted revenge, because I understood patterns. Malcolm had been moving toward this moment from the day he arrived. Men like him always mistook quiet preparation for weakness. My first stop was a small notary office 3 blocks from the courthouse. The clerk recognized me, but asked no questions. She watched as I placed the document on the counter, the formal execution notice tied to the Founders Protection Clause, Section 5.4 of the original operating charter. Her eyebrows lifted slightly when she read the first paragraph. I signed where I needed to sign. She stamped the page. The seal hit the paper with a sound so small, it almost felt harmless. It was not harmless. By 8:47 a.m., I was at the courier desk. I paid for immediate legal delivery to Ellison Ridge's general counsel, Victoria Lane. Signature required, no substitutes. At 9 a.m., the envelope left my hands, and Malcolm's clock started ticking, while the courier crossed downtown with that envelope in his satchel. Malcolm Pierce was upstairs acting like a man who had just rescued the company from a natural disaster. By 10 that morning, someone had already forwarded me a screenshot from the executive Slack channel. Malcolm had posted a picture of an empty office chair with the caption, "Making space for the future." Under it, 3 of his new hires reacted with rocket emojis. One added, "Legacy cleanup starts now." I stared at the screen for a moment, then saved the image in a folder named Evidence. Not anger, not yet. Evidence. Malcolm spent the rest of the day performing victory. He ordered catered lunch for the leadership floor, gave a casual toast about removing outdated bottlenecks, and introduced a draft restructuring plan titled Ellison Ridge 2.0. I heard all of this because loyalty does not disappear just because payroll stops. People still text. People still remember who answered the phone when their department was collapsing at midnight. One message came from someone in finance. He thinks you were the obstacle. Another came from legal. Victoria looks worried. That one made me sit back. Because Victoria Lane did not worry easily. She had the kind of face that made bad news apologize before entering the room. Malcolm! Of course. Noticed nothing. He was too busy replacing experience with enthusiasm. He moved one of his old business school friends into vendor strategy. Despite the man once confusing a supplier holdback with a customer refund, he told operations to route all process questions through a new shared dashboard called Momentum Hub. He announced that old approval chains would be reviewed for emotional attachment. The man had fired me in the morning and was already trying to rewrite the company by lunch. What he did not know was simple. The founder's protection clause was not decorative language buried in an old charter. It was a legal tripwire Graham Ellison created for exactly this kind of arrogance. If a protected operations officer was terminated without board review, severance compliance, and founder trust notification, authority could revert within 72 hours. Malcolm thought he had cleared the room. He had opened the trapdoor beneath his own feet by early afternoon. The first crack appeared in Malcolm's perfect little celebration. A text came through from an old friend in compliance. No greeting, no punctuation. Just one sentence. Victoria just pulled the 2008 charter archive. I read it twice. Then I put my phone face down and looked out the window of the coffee shop across from Ellison Ridge's headquarters. From where I sat, I could see the top floors glowing in the gray Seattle light. Somewhere up there, Malcolm was probably still talking about transformation. Unaware that the company's legal department had just opened the one drawer he should have feared most, the 2008 archive was not digital in the neat, searchable way Malcolm preferred. It lived in scanned binders, locked folders, original wet signatures, and certification pages with state seals pressed so deeply into the paper you could feel them under your fingertips. Graham had insisted on that. He trusted technology. But he trusted records more. Victoria Lane understood that. At 2:16 p.m., another message arrived. They found Section 5.4. I did not smile. I just breathed a little slower. That section had been reviewed more than once. Reaffirmed in 2014. Certified again in 2019 after a governance audit. I knew because I had personally walked the paperwork from legal to the boardroom and back. Every signature, every attachment, every notarized addendum. Malcolm had assumed anything old was weak. That was his mistake. Old documents are not weak when they still have signatures attached to them. Old clauses are not harmless when they were written by a founder who knew exactly how power could rot in the wrong hands. By 4 o'clock, the tone of the messages changed. Legal is asking who approved your termination. Board office wants the severance file. HR is scrambling. There it was. The clause was not dead. It was not symbolic. It was not some dusty paragraph for sentimental people who liked filing cabinets. It was active, and if Victoria confirmed what I already knew, Malcolm had not just violated company policy, he had triggered a transfer of operational authority. The next morning, my access to the employee portal flickered back to life for less than 3 minutes. That should not have happened. Terminated employees at Ellison Ridge lost system access within 15 minutes. I knew that because I had written the offboarding checklist myself after a contractor walked away with a procurement login in 2013. So when my phone buzzed with a security notification, I opened my laptop and signed in before whoever made the mistake could fix it. There, in the HR records, was the first clumsy attempt to rewrite the past. My termination notice had been uploaded with a new effective date. Wednesday, not Tuesday, not 7:59 a.m.e. When Malcolm Pierce sat across from me and called 17 years of service a limitation. Wednesday, a full day later. A neat little adjustment. just enough to muddy the 72-hour window and give legal something to argue over. I almost respected the desperation. Almost. But history only bends when nobody kept receipts. I had the original calendar invite sent at 7:56 a.m. I had the parking garage timestamp from when I entered the building. I had my final paycheck deposit confirmation from 8:19 a.m. I had the notary seal recorded at 8:41. I had the courier receipt showing legal delivery dispatched at 9 o'clock sharp. And by noon, Victoria Lane's office had signed for the envelope. Every piece had a time. Every time had a trail. I downloaded what I could before the portal locked again. Then I forwarded the screenshots to my attorney, Marisol Grant. With one sentence, "They are trying to move the date." Her reply came back 2 minutes later. "Let them." That was all. No panic, no lecture, no dramatic warning. Just let them. Because the more they tried to revise the record, the more they proved they knew the record mattered. And somewhere inside Ellison Ridge, Malcolm was learning a lesson I had learned years ago. Paper does not panic, people do. Monday morning's board meeting was supposed to be Malcolm's victory lap, from what I heard later. He entered the executive conference room carrying a tablet, a green smoothie, and the kind of confidence only ignorance can produce. He had prepared a presentation called The Next Era of Ellison Ridge, complete with clean fonts, empty slogans, and a slide about eliminating legacy dependency. He stood at the front of the room like a man unveiling a monument to himself. "Our future requires speed," he told them. "We cannot keep allowing outdated internal habits to slow innovation." No one interrupted him at first. Then, Victoria Lane raised her hand. Victoria was not theatrical. She did not waste words, and she never raised her voice unless a building was on fire or a contract had teeth. So when she placed a thick gray folder on the table and said, "We need to address a governance issue before this meeting continues," the room changed. Malcolm frowned like she had spilled coffee on his speech. "If this is about Naomi," he said, "HR is handling the transition." Victoria looked at him for one long second. HR mishandled the transition. That was when the board chair, Evelyn Mercer, leaned forward. "What exactly are we discussing?" Victoria opened the folder. Naomi Carter's termination triggered Section 5.4 of the Founders' Protection Clause in the original Ellison Ridge Operating Charter. Malcolm laughed once, short and sharp. "That old thing I was told most of those documents were obsolete." "They are not obsolete," Victoria said. "They were reaffirmed in the 2019 governance audit. The clause is active, enforceable, and specifically designed to prevent unilateral removal of protected operations leadership without board review." The silence that followed was not confusion. It was calculation. Victoria continued. "There was no documented board approval. Severance compliance was incomplete. Founder trust notification was not completed before termination, based on the timeline and Naomi's executed notice. The reversion mechanism has been triggered." Malcolm's smile disappeared. Evelyn asked. "What does that mean?" Victoria closed the folder. "It means operational authority may transfer out of Malcolm's control within 72 hours. By Tuesday morning, the board was no longer asking whether the clause mattered. They were asking who it belonged to." Victoria Lane arrived with a sealed trust envelope held flat between both hands, as if even tilting it might change the future. The envelope had been stored with Graham Ellison's private directives since 2020 witnessed, notarized, and logged under founder succession materials. It was not something Malcolm could dismiss with a buzzword or bury under a calendar revision. Evelyn Mercer, the board chair, asked the room to go silent. For once, Malcolm obeyed. Victoria broke the seal with a silver letter opener. No one breathed loudly. No one shuffled papers. Even the wall clock seemed rude for ticking. Inside was a single cream-colored page. Victoria unfolded it, read the name, and stopped. That pause did more damage than any speech could have. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Victoria passed her the page without speaking. Evelyn read it once, then again. Her expression shifted. Not into shock exactly, but into recognition, the kind people feel when the answer was standing in front of them for years, and they were too distracted to honor it. Malcolm pushed back from the table. Just say it. No one did. He stood. Say the name. Evelyn finally looked up. Naomi Carter. The words landed cleanly, without drama, which somehow made them heavier. Malcolm laughed. But it broke halfway through. No. That is impossible. She was operations. She was trusted, Victoria said. He looked around the room, searching for someone to rescue him from the truth. No one moved. The trust named me as Graham Ellison's appointed successor for operational reversion. Not Malcolm, not a board favorite, not some polished outsider with a vocabulary full of empty thunder. Me, the woman he had fired before breakfast, and for the first time since he entered that company. Malcolm Pierce finally understood what he had touched. At 8:58 a.m. on Thursday, I walked back through the front doors of Ellison Ridge Technologies. No announcement, no entourage, no dramatic music, just me. A black suit, my old badge, and a leather folder tucked under my arm. The security guard saw my name on the reinstated access list and straightened so quickly I almost smiled. Almost. The boardroom was already full when I entered. Evelyn sat at the head of the table with Victoria beside her. Malcolm stood near the windows, pale and unshaven, pretending the view outside mattered more than the judgment inside. I did not look at him first. I walked to the open seat at the front, placed my folder on the table, and sat down. Evelyn spoke clearly. Under Section 5.4 of the Founders Protection Clause, Naomi Carter has assumed operational authority of Ellison Ridge Technologies. Effective immediately, Victoria added. Legal confirms the transfer is valid and entered into the governance record. Hands rose around the table to acknowledge the change. One by one. Calmly, completely. Malcolm finally snapped. You are really giving her control. This company needs vision, not nostalgia. I opened my folder and removed a single document. Vision without structure is just noise, I said. Then I slid the paper across the table. His separation agreement, prepared by legal, approved by the board, effective immediately, for the first time. Malcolm had no clever phrase ready. He stared at the page as if paperwork had betrayed him personally. Security stepped closer, quiet but unmistakable. He looked at me, bitter and stunned. You think you won, I stood. No. Malcolm, I said softly. I think Graham built a company strong enough to survive you. Then I turned to the board. Now, I said, opening the next file. Let's get back to work. This story reminded me that true power does not always come from titles, loud voices, or corner offices. It comes from preparation, integrity, and knowing your worth even when others try to erase it. I learned 5 lessons. First, never underestimate the person who understands how everything truly works. Second, loyalty and years of service should never be mistaken for weakness. Third, arrogance can make people ignore the very rules that protect an organization. Fourth, keeping records, staying calm, and preparing wisely can be more powerful than reacting in anger. Fifth, real leadership is not about control, but about protecting what others helped build. And what about you? Did this story leave you with a lesson of your own? Share it in the comments, because your perspective may help someone else feel stronger today. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember their value.
Welcome to Boardroom Revenge Stories, a channel focused on workplace conflict, corporate betrayal, power struggles, and quiet justice. Our stories follow a structured workflow to deliver a consistent, immersive experience. We start by analyzing real discussions on Reddit, Facebook, Quora, and blogs. Next, we craft original scripts using AI tools like ChatGPT. We then use 11 Labs to transform text into high-quality voice and edit everything in CapCut for a smooth, cinematic finish. Thumbnails are designed with Canva, and every video is carefully reviewed before release. These stories go beyond entertainment, revealing how power truly works and how justice quietly unfolds.